All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good friend Rania Khalek. Rania is an independent journalist whose work has been seen at Alternet, Truthout, Salon, In These Times, all of which and more you can find at raniakhalek.com. You can also find her on Twitter at Rania Khalek. Rania, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
All right, so Rania, you recently wrote a really phenomenal piece on how the United States media portrays rape culture as strictly a foreign problem. Tell us all about the piece.
Well, this was from last week. It was back when the rape in New Delhi, India, had really, garnered national headlines, international headlines, as it should have, because it was really brutal. And the young woman who was gang raped on a bus, had died. And the media in the U.S., talked about this a lot. And they talked about what they called a rape culture in India, and how rapists often go unprosecuted, and how there's a lot of victim blaming. And this is all very true. In terms of India, from what I hear. I mean, I don't live there, but what's really, really interesting, and what I noted in my piece about the media's portrayal of Indian rape culture, is the fact that in the United States, we have a rape culture here as well, and the U.S. media really has a hard time ever talking about it. I mean, literally, this is probably the first time I can remember ever seeing, CNN or even MSNBC talk about or use the phrase rape culture, because we have a lot of really awful, disgusting acts of rape in this country that get brushed under the table. I mean, there's not people being, gang raped on buses, it's maybe not as gruesome as this one particular incident. I mean, that doesn't happen very commonly, around the world. But in the U.S., we do have really disgusting, horrific incidences of even gang rapes. I mean, it's not that uncommon. And if depending on who the rapist is or who the alleged rapists are, if they're people in positions of power, or people connected to people in positions of power, they often, the victim often gets blamed. And it's something that is really serious, and has really big consequences when you have a media and a culture like we do in the United States that treats victims of rape in such a dismissive and condescending way as they do, where they blame them for dressing provocatively, or they blame them for being drunk or being out at night or whatever it may be, rather than blaming the rapist. We have this culture that almost, sort of accepts that rape is not as serious as it is, and that often will not, I don't want to say side with the rapist, but really puts the onus on the victims to prevent it, as opposed to saying, hey, guys, don't rape.
Right. You actually wrote, you quoted a New York Times article from a year ago about an 11-year-old victim, and the Times actually wrote, this is the New York Times here, when they're talking to people in the town, this reading from the Times, quote, they said she dressed older than her age, wearing makeup and fashions more appropriate to a woman in her 20s. This is the New York Times saying that this 11-year-old girl was essentially asking to be raped, and this is the New York Times here that's writing this.
Yeah, this was really problematic, and people were rightly outraged about this, because it was a really short article. This happened sometime last year. I want to say like over the summer, but not that it really matters. Either way, the New York Times wrote this very short piece about an 11-year-old girl, and this is in America, in Cleveland, Texas, who was gang raped by, I mean, it was ridiculous, like 18 men and boys, ranging in like ages like 15 and up, so adults as well. She was gang raped in this abandoned trailer, and the New York Times story, rather than talk about what happened and rather than report on the story, in a lens that shows you the consequences for the victim, almost the entire story was devoted to either blaming the 11-year-old girl, and what they did is they quoted people from the neighborhood who were just giving their opinions about how she dressed provocatively, how her parents sort of let her do whatever she wanted. I mean, literally just blaming this girl. I don't know why we need to know the opinions of people in the neighborhood about what this girl wears. I mean, it doesn't matter how somebody is dressed. It's not why people are raped. It's not why women and girls and sometimes boys are raped. It's not because they're dressing in short skirts. It's a power dynamic. And not only that, but they also focused a lot on the perpetrators. Quoting people who were saying in the town who were saying, "Oh my gosh, like why did these boys? We don't understand why these boys did this. What's going to happen to our young men? How are they going to live with this for the rest of their lives?" I believe was one quote that they included. I mean, it's just shocking. It's utterly shocking. Like portraying the perpetrators as the victims or even like the main part of the story. I mean, it's just outrageous. And this is the New York Times. So this is really common, though. This isn't out of the ordinary. This is how we treat victims of rape. We blame them. We ask, "Oh, well, why? What were they doing to get raped?" And it's really, it's outrageous, and it happens time and again. And like you wanted to introduce the whole Steubenville incident. And what's really fascinating about Steubenville is that when the U.S. media was discussing rape culture in India, they seemed to be very seem to be much more nuanced about it. Like they seem to know so much about the context of what allows. I mean, it's not like rape. It's not like having a rape culture means that every guy is going to rape. It's not the case. It means that you're creating an environment where rape is not treated seriously. And so people who want to rape will be empowered to rape and they get away with it. And you create a culture of intimidation and ostracize, and you ostracize the victims, that they're less likely to come forward. So the point is, they seem to be able to talk about this in India, right? But when it comes to America, they seem incapable of it, as if rape culture is just like this foreign issue. Like we think of it as, sexism. That's not an American problem. That's a problem in these sort of, patriarchal brown people countries, right?
Right.
But then you come back here, and it's like in August we have the Steubenville incident, and you see the way the U.S. media is treating Steubenville, and they're treating it like an isolated incident where it's something that happened in this one little town because something is wrong with this town, something is wrong with these particular boys, they're sociopaths, and that's the end of it. It's like we don't want to have the broader conversation of the environment that allows this to happen, that permits the kind of like what we're seeing some authorities possibly covering up what's happening in Steubenville. We don't know if that's the case, but it might be. People are shocked by it, but this is what happens.